193. This falsifier of history obviously very well knows that the Caucasian Albanians have existed from the 1st to the 6th centuries on the left bank of the Cowe River, while the historic Armenian province of Artsakh of Greater Armenia was on the right banks of the Cowe River. He also very well knows that the ancestors of today's Azeri Turks were Turkic-speaking tribes that began their invasion of the Caucasus from their Altaic homeland in Central Asia only beginning in the 11th century. The name Azerbaijanis was given in 1922 by the Bolsheviks of Moscow to the Turkic people that before were known as the Tatars of Caucasus.
It is not a coincidence that the claims of Turkish government's Center of Strategic Research and the parts of the Ronald Suny's book are very similar. It is also not a coincidence that the former head of the Turkish desk of the Central Intelligence Agency, a career spy and renowned Turkophile Paul Hentz, made a generous admiration of Suny's work and welcomed the publication of his book in the appraisal made in the Russian Review in April of 1995. When Armenian Studies chairs in the U.S. universities are led by the CIA and its career spies, it is quite obvious for us what kind of political goals are being pursued and what happens to the concept of academic integrity and honesty.
Next one of these falsifiers is Robert Thompson, who is a former Galus Gulbenkian professor of Armenian Studies at Oxford University. This one is even afraid to show his face and place this dark image of himself on the university faculty website. He has purposefully distorted the translations of classical Armenian historians like Movses Khorenatsi, Ghazar Parpetsi, and Yerishe. Following the orders of his handlers, Robert Thompson executes a political agenda by stating that Movses Khorenatsi, Pavstos Buzand, and Yerishe are pseudo-historians who never lived in the 5th century. In 1986, during a conference on medieval Armenian studies that took place in Yerevan, Richard Hovannisian tried to defend Robert Thompson and calm down the Armenian academicians who stated their protest against this falsifier of history, Robert Thompson.
Richard Hovannisian. He is the Armenian Educational Foundation Chair in Modern Armenian History at UCLA. This corrupt historian, in his books, uses the Turkish terminology for Armenian highland and historic Armenia by calling it Eastern Anatolia. In 1997, the representatives of the False Armenological School in the U.S., headed by Richard Hovannisian, published a collective 2-volume grossly falsified Armenian Studies book entitled The Armenian People from Ancient to Modern Times for students in the U.S. We must also note here that his son, Rafi Hovannisian, who is a graduate of CIA affiliate Fletcher University School of Diplomacy, in June of 2008 made a speech at the Assembly of the Council of Europe in Strasbourg, demanding along with the Turkish and Azerbaijani delegations that the Council of Europe must terminate Republic of Armenia's voting right in the Assembly of the Council of Europe.
James R. Russell. He is the Marshall Professor of Armenian Studies at the Harvard University.
It's racist. It's a distortion. No, because I don't have any of those desires to distort your history or anything of the kind. That's nonsense. It's nonsense.
In the book The Armenian People from Ancient to Modern Times, the so-called professor of Armenology in fact shows himself a complete ignoramus who cannot even differentiate the nations and languages of the Hittites and Hattians. Even a 5th grade student knows that the fortress of Erebuni was erected by King Argishti I, yet this Harvard professor claims that the fortress of Erebuni was actually built by Argishti II. This falsifier calls the Armenian people colonists in their own homeland. In 2000, in the official journal of the Armenian National Academy of Sciences, Professor Armen Petrosyan exposed James Russell's work as complete fiction and utter ignorance of historical facts. Russell's work is full of gross mistakes and distortions that are designed to misinform and completely lead astray students of Armenian history and culture. Alina Ayvazian. This is a new face of the False Armenological School in the United States. She became an urologist by receiving her PhD from the University of California, Berkeley in 2006 under Marion H. Feldman. In the official site of the Berkeley, Feldman uses terms like ancient Turkey to describe Armenian highland. In fact, the term ancient Turkey does not exist in world historiography. This is complete ignorance or a deliberate distortion of truth based on a political agenda. Similar ignorance and perversion of facts was made by her apprentice Alina Ayvazian, who in 2008 presented a lecture entitled Erebuni, New Discoveries in the Capital of Argishti. When the audience asked her that the capital of Urartu wasn't Erebuni and was in fact always Tushpa, she replied,
"You know, that was my mistake. I keep calling Erebuni the capital and I keep being asked that question. It's because earlier on when I started studying Urartu, I read a number of things, older research which called Erebuni a capital."
What? Where did you read that? There's no such book anywhere in existence that calls Erebuni the capital of Urartu. Alina Ayvazian also claims that Urartu does not have any connection with the Armenians. If Urartu does not have any connection with the Armenian people, as Alina Ayvazian claims, then what is this ignorant professor doing in teaching Armenian studies at the University of Irvine?
Peter Cowie, Narekatsi Professor of Armenian Studies in UCLA. He received his PhD from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem in 1983. Many of his students feel insulted by Peter Cowie as their national identity is being trivialized and ridiculed. The university faculty website shows that Peter Cowie's current research is focused on the history of Armenian theater and film, Armenian medieval history, and growth of modern Armenian nationalism. Who is this guy really working for? He's studying about Armenian theater and at the same time inquiring about Armenian nationalism?
Այնպես որ այդքան ուրեմն պետք չէ մեղքանալ այդքան պետք չէ ուրեմն փոշմանել որ անցյալը իր ասենք լրալայն ուրեմն ամբողջականությունը բան ողջունչացվել է.
Just like the other representatives of the False Armenological School, Peter Cowie claims that Armenians are newcomers to Armenian highland, whose culture begins only around 600 BC. This falsifier of Armenian history and culture claims that the works of the medieval 5th century Armenian historians are, quote, parahistorical texts. Peter Cowie, Yerishe Armenian War, page 345. For example, Peter Cowie does not want to accept the fact that Armenians during the medieval times had universities such as the renowned Gladzur University, which he calls, quote, monastic school. Peter Cowie, La Maison, pages 200 through 205. We can cite hundreds of such distortions and falsifications of Armenian history and culture by Peter Cowie. But let us concentrate on what he is teaching to his students at the university.